This is Custom Maps here. On this episode, we have a pretty special episode for you guys. We're going to be showing you guys what is inside this 1986 Arctic Cat Suzuki Spirit engine. This is a liquid-cooled, oil-injected two-stroke. You guys, actually, most of you guys probably have a two-stroke engine at your house, whether it be a weed whacker, chainsaw, blower. Of course, they all have to be gas. And not all weed whacker, chainsaws, and blowers are two-stroke. Some are four-stroke. So, on this engine, the oil injection, which mixes the fuel, so you don't have to mix fuel, which you have to do for most weed whackers, chainsaws, and blowers. This actually has a oil line coming off, going to a big container of two-stroke oil. It has to be two-stroke oil. You cannot run four-stroke in these motors. It won't run too good, and it won't lubricate it properly. So, if you're coming off to the oil injection pump actually worked. We did not have a failure in this pump, which I would think would be the problem, but it's not. So if you follow this line coming off, it goes to this cylinder. There's two cylinders in this motor, and then that means there are two lines, one line per cylinder. So this cylinder line is totally fine. That is why this cylinder is perfectly fine, lubricated, totally reusable. Now, if we come over to this cylinder, the line is still up here on top, and then if you follow it down, it is broken. Right here, if I get it. There it is, it's broken. If you guys can see it, right there. It's broken off from the oil injection pump, which is pretty much why this thing is so badly scored. When you have metal on metal riding together going 8,000 RPM, if you guys can imagine, that does not work too well. It will score the piston. That is why motors need oil in them, so that stuff does not happen. So we're going to be completely tearing this two-stroke engine apart, showing you guys how it works. So first, I sprayed all the bolts down with some PV Blaster penetrating fluid. This stuff works the best in my opinion. WD-40 works good, but it's not as good as PV Blaster, I think. But if you have WD-40, that works just well. Or if you don't have any of this stuff, you can also just break it free by hand. It will be pretty hard on most of these motors because they have been heated, cooled, rusted. So bolts are not particularly easy to get off. I have this 25-inch breaker bar I've been using to get bolts off. That works good. And I've been cornering against the wall and pushing on it super hard. But I do recommend using a pneumatic impact gun or an electric impact gun, such as this one. This is a Ryobi from Home Depot. Any impact gun works, just as long as it gets the job done. I would have liked to use a pneumatic impact gun, except my air compressor is currently out of order right now. I have a part coming for it Friday, so we should be able to get that thing up and going again. But in the meantime, let's get this two-stroke engine all apart. I already loosened all the bolts on this, so we don't have to have those time lapses of me just pushing super hard and can't get the thing undone. So let's get right into this time lapse. I got both heads unbolted here. It used a 14 mil and a 12 mil for the small studs over here. These are all studs on here. They're not bolts, so they should come right off. I have not tried lifting them off yet. I got this oil injection line undone and this one over here undone. I'll show you that once I get them both off. I'm pulling the good one off right now, so we can see what that one looks like. I'll give you guys some good light here too. If I can figure out. So here we go. Oh, that's coming off easy. Oh, there we are. Oh, yep. And the washers are all falling off on here. That's because I did not take them off on here. So this side looks pretty decent. Definitely could be better, but not too bad. Definitely usable. Oh, wait, hold on, maybe not. Oh my gosh, guys, this side was not good either. No wonder this thing was smoking tons. I thought it was just because of two-stroke. You know what that is right there, guys? My gloves are really dirty. That is a piece of broken ring in this motor. We have a broken ring on the PTO side cylinder, which is this side, the left side. So I was wondering why it was all smoky. We thought it was a broken ring, but we're just gonna let it go because it's two-stroke. Oh, never mind. No, we do not have. This is a broken piston. My bad. This is a broken piston. I'll pull the tripod over here. We're gonna have to get a new piston for this side too. More money adding up here. So I'll show you guys what's going on in this one too. So now for the real reveal of the bad one, we're gonna pull this side off. Hopefully, this side actually we're replacing piston and bore, but hopefully the bottom end is still good in this. So let's lift it off here. The washers are also gonna fall for this one. Oh, this one might look like the piston's is still intact. So yeah, it's definitely scored. This is the reeds right here. This helps for just the performance of the motor, stuff like that. So I'm gonna inspect this piston real quick, see if it's still intact. The rings look good. No, the rings are bad actually. That should be expected on a scored piston. The piston is very rough. Both of these gaskets are still good. Let's see here. Hopefully this is still good. Let's see. Oh, there's a piece of piston down in the bottom end here. So this might not be good. Might not be good anymore. Crankshaft, definitely seeing a little bit better days. But from here, it's looking like it might still be usable. Hopefully it still is. So we'll check that out. But I'll show you guys the scored cylinder head right here. So hopefully you guys can see up in there. Pretty much, if you can see all those markings from going straight up and down, that is the piston without oil in it. And if you take a close look in here, this is where the exhaust goes in, right in there. I'm sure you can't see that probably. This is the carburetor side where the oil injection port is. And then all these little holes in here, coolant will be down deep in, will be inside this casting, not where the piston is, but like it'll surround this to make it so this motor cools good and everything, because overheating is no good for motors, which overheating can also be caused by lack of lubrication, which this one had lack of lubrication, obviously. So that could be a sign of overheating. Overheating, you could also have water pump failure, water hose, radiator failure. It could be a bunch of stuff to go with overheating. Usually, it's decently obvious what's wrong here. But in this case, we definitely knew something was up. I didn't think the motor was actually going to be this bad inside. This is actually not too good to see. Whenever you open up a motor and you see that this piston is scored along with the cylinder walls, and then you open this one up and think it's fine, but then you see the piston is broken, it's obviously something had a catastrophic failure in it or something. I believe it was this piston. Well, I believe all this stuff happened before I got it, so which could have been why he was selling it. He said he hasn't really ran in 5 years, which I do believe him on that, but that could be why this sled was parked. And it was only registered 1 year. It was registered 86, 87, when the sled was brand new. I doubt this motor went bad in 86, but it could have been. It only has 800 miles on it, so the sled could have only been ridden 1 year. When I pull the skis off, the bottoms look really good, except that one is rusted out a little bit from sitting. Nothing major, but I'm going to look into getting a new set of skis for it. But anyway, this sled motor is not looking too good. I'm going to pull the bottom end off, and then we can see what's going on in there too. Another thing, I know you guys are going to say, you keyboard mechanics out there, you're going to say, why are you using chromies on your impact? You're going to break them. And personally, it's my sockets. Don't tell me what to do with my sockets, so that's that. So, in order to get this bottom end apart, I got to get this thing off, and all these screws are so rusted and stripped. I don't really need to get the bottom end apart, because we're just going to be doing a top end rebuild on these 2-strokes, which is the most common type of rebuild on a 2-stroke engine or snowmobile engine for that matter. So we're just going to leave this alone. In the future, see how things go. We might replace the crank seals, which I probably still will replace crank seals on this motor, so that way we don't have the headache of it next time. But I'm going to still go over what is in this bottom end. There's not really much in the bottom end of a 2-stroke motor. It's all visible from up top here pretty much. So I'm going to take both of these pistons off, show you how to do it, and show you what they look like. So we're going to start with this one, the right side piston, because it is elevated and this one's closer down towards the block. I'll spin the motor over, and then this piston will come up and that one will go down. So that way then we can do a closer inspection of the crank and the rods. I believe the crank is fine. It looks like it, but we'll do a close inspection of it before we put this motor back together, which will be in a future episode, probably episode, this is episode 2, so probably episode 4. Episode 3 will probably be cleaning the walnuts out of this sled. So that's it. So how to get these pistons out, what you're going to do is you're going to see this clip in here, and then you'll pull that out. I'll get the camera and show you guys what I'm talking about with the clip and stuff here. So, if you look in here, right here, you guys can see I got my little pick in there. There is a little spring clip in there, right there. See that? You're gonna want to pry that out. I like to put my hand over the clip so when it pulls out, it's liable to be flying. So that way, when you have your hand over it, you can catch it. And then once you get this clip out, you can just pound the wrist pin out this side. This side also has a clip on it. You could do it either way. So you can pound the wrist pin. That is this little pin that connects the piston to the piston rod. So we can just pound that out with a punch. You could use a bolt too. That's the redneck punch. If you don't have a punch, you just use a bolt, screwdriver, anything you need. But I do recommend using a punch, and you should really probably be using a brass punch so you don't mar the wrist pin too bad so you can't get it in. So I'm going to get this out for you guys, and then we'll show you the piston. You guys can see right here, that is not how a piston is supposed to look. Unfortunately, well, I do have a piston. I'll show you guys. It is to a 350 small block Chevy, so it is not exactly the same. That is closer to how a piston's supposed to look, minus the chunk missing right here. So if you come over to that side, that's about how it's supposed to look. All that dirt's not usually on it. So this piston is really bad. If you run your hand over it, it kind of feels like sandpaper. It's super rough. So obviously this motor's not going to run properly. So I was actually mistaken. You do need to remove both of these clips. This is what the clips look like. I got both of them removed with my hook and pick set. On some 2-stroke engines, like chainsaws, I know I keep referring to that back as a reference, you don't actually need to remove these. There is, it's more of a bolt design, where there's a big end to it, and then you just have one pin you remove and you can just punch it out. But this end, both of these clips ride in 2 notches, so you cannot pop it out that easy. So you got to remove both clips pretty much. And then the wrist pin is free, so hopefully. So then we're just going to take our punch and hammer it out. Okay, so piston number 1 is out. This is the piston out of it. It has 2 rings. As you can see there, it is really bad. There's even some big chips out of it. If you rotate it around, same on the other side. Look at that. You see real there, there's scarring on it. everything inside of it looks normal, which there shouldn't be anything but wrong with it inside because that doesn't have any wear on it. This is the wrist pin. No noticeable bad parts on it. There is some wear marks in it, but that is just because of the bearing in it. These are the two pistons. And then if we come over here, this is our connecting rod right here. There's a needle bearing in there. And up top here, there's also a needle bearing, which the wrist pin rides inside, like so. And then the piston goes onto the wrist pin, and this bearing can spin because the piston has to move a little bit to go up and down because this crankshaft is off-centered. The things on it, so they're not right centered, because if they were centered, the pistons wouldn't be able to go up and down. So these connecting rods have to be able to move to keep the pistons to go straight up and down, so that's why they're on needle bearings. This bearing actually looks really good. There's no wear in the thing. It looks like it's actually brand new, but I'm sure it's not brand new, because if it was brand new, you know, we wouldn't have these problems. This motor would be brand new if that was brand new too, probably. I doubt this motor's been gone into before. Besides the mark on the bores here, here it is right here. There's an R, which looks like it might have been engraved with a pocket knife. If anyone can tell me, was that done at the Suzuki factory, or did someone actually go into this motor before and do some work into it? It doesn't really look like it, but you never know. It could have been once rebuilt before. Who knows? So we're going to get this cylinder off, or this piston out, and I'm going to set you guys up on time lapse so you can watch the full process. So I've got piston number 2 out, and we'll take a close look at this one. It doesn't look anything out of the normal. This piston could be reused if this piece was not missing and broken. I don't know if it would actually, if you replace this piston and put a new cylinder wall, if it would actually still run with that piece missing. I would actually assume that it might, because you got both rings here, and that's what really gives it the good compression. So I said before you only need to remove one pin. I was correct. You do only need to remove one pin. I second guessed myself and put 2. I was not thinking. I didn't get a very good sleep last night. That's probably why. So pretty much what you got to do is you remove one pin, and your wrist pin's going to be in there, and then you decide to remove the pin. You go to the opposite side with the pin still in it, and then you take your punch and pound the wrist pin out towards the pin that you removed side, and that will come right out, and then you have a piston that is removed from the connecting rod. So this piston, definitely not reusable. There's actually some super deep marks in it. It's just not even, I don't even think it would run on that. Well, clearly it wouldn't run on that because it didn't run before. And this one is broken, so I don't know if that would run on that one either. It definitely would not be ideal for the motor. Let's just put it at that. So before I end this video, I'm going to go over all the parts of a 2-stroke engine, the special features of this motor, to give you guys a quick recap of what's in a 2-stroke motor for what you came for. So starting off with what's inside of a 2-stroke, obviously you have the bottom end. There is a crankshaft in here. This is generally the bottom end. Crankshaft and stuff like crankshaft and seals. That's pretty much bottom end. Then we have connecting rods, which hold the wrist pin to go into the piston. Then we have our needle bearings. There's one up here and one down here, also to help the piston move. We didn't really cover this, but on this side there is a stator. That is to power, just to give power. It's kind of like your alternator of a car. There is a water pump in here because this is a liquid-cooled motor, and that works exactly like your car. There is a pull start assembly here and a flywheel in there. The flywheel is on top of the stator with the magnets in it, and then the pull start drives this, spins the motor over, and there's spark in it, and then it ignites the fuel, and then the motor keeps on going from there. So then on to the top end parts, more of this motor. There is a carburetor. This is a 34 mil. This does not go to this motor. This motor runs twin 38 Makunis, but this is exactly like it, just this carburetor is a little bit smaller. So then we have, this really depends on how many cylinders your motor is. If you have one cylinder, you only have one head. So these are what rides on top of the cylinder walls, and the piston almost very closely comes into contact with them. This is your cylinder bore with a liquid cooled portion in here for the antifreeze, which all two-stroke motors do not have liquid cooled. So if you have liquid cooled, you have this stuff to the coolant to go inside of there. This is where the carburetor bolts on. There is a little thing fit in there. Then there is this fitting to put the oil injection line on to insert oil into the cylinders, so we don't have a scored piston like we did. And then all of these are ports in here, and then they come out the exhaust. This is where all the fumes come out, and they run out the exhaust pipes. This is our piston. This is the closer version of the good one, although this one is chipped. That also depends on how many cylinders you have. If you have one cylinder, you have one piston. Two cylinders, two pistons. And same with the wrist pins. This is a wrist pin. That rides on the needle bearing to provide, so it doesn't wear out the piston, stuff like that. And coming over here, you guys might have just said, you already showed us this, but on the back part here, if we look in here, there is reeds. These are power reeds. It's more of like kind of like a valve for a two-stroke. Two-strokes don't have actual mechanical valves that go in them, like a four-stroke does. Two-strokes also do not have cams in them to drive the valves, because there are no valves in there. They don't need a cam. That's why they're called two-strokes. They have two, not four-strokes. And this is the second piston for two-cylinder motors. And then we have all the wiring stuff for spark. You also need a coil to give yourself spark that is still on the sled. And this motor has an oil injection pump to pump the oil in for pre-mix, so you don't have to mix the fuel and still run a two-stroke. A lot of two-strokes don't have oil injection, so you don't have the oil injection pump in here. So that way you just mix the gas. Also down here in the bottom end, there are crank seals, one on each side, so the air doesn't get in there, create a vacuum leak and stuff like that. Along with seals on pretty much every part of the motor. And then these two lines, which we haven't really gone over, are vacuum lines, which drive the fuel pumps. There are dual fuel pumps on this sled. That is why there is two vacuum lines, one for each cylinder, just like everything else on this sled. And then there's also a belt in here, driving from the crankshaft, which connects to the flywheel, and then the belt pulley connects to the flywheel, and the belt rides on the pulley, which drives the water pump. Now this bolt right here is a tensioner, so you can tension the water pump and get that nice and snug where you want it, because belts do stretch over the time and they do wear out. So if you're overheating, your water pump's not working, make sure to check your belt first before you go buy a new water pump and the same thing doesn't work again. This is for the thermostat housing to control the cooling of it. This is a temperature gauge, which is currently broken. You put the thermostat in here and just sits in there. There's usually 3 bolts. The one bolt is broken out to easy out that. And that pretty much covers for everything inside of a two-stroke. Two-strokes, they're not really that complicated. They're easier than a four-stroke. If you're gonna start on a motor, I'd recommend two-stroke. They're much more complicated, or much less complicated. If you really want to get easy, start with a weed whacker so you don't have oil injection or water cooled. It's just air cooled. That is a really good place to start. That's where I started, and I've been working my way up all the way to big diesel engines soon. So this motor, it will be rebuilt, and so stay tuned for the next part of rebuilding this motor. That should be a little bit though, because I gotta get parts for it and stuff like that, and I have other projects in front of this project. I just want to see what was going on with it so I can start looking for parts. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that comment, or to like, comment, and subscribe for more videos like this. Let me know your personal experience with two-strokes, or anything you have to add to this video for future references. So I'm sure people would love to hear it. If I said something wrong, feel free to correct me. I'm always open to suggestions, so thanks for watching.